Nothing like the sound of your marriage dying while you're elbow deep in transmission fluid. I was under Mrs. Henderson's '98 Camry when I heard them through the open garage door. My wife Jessica and her 3 witches, cackling in my kitchen like they owned the place. "You deserve so much better, Jess," came Tara's voice, dripping with fake concern. "Why settle for this lifestyle?" I could practically hear Jessica's shrug. "Maybe I shouldn't." The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers, clanging against the oil pan. 38 years old, and this is how I find out my wife's checking out of our marriage, eavesdropping from under a car like some pathetic mechanic in a bad movie. My name's Mike Thompson, and I own Thompson's Auto in Cedar Falls, Ohio. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work that's kept food on our table for 15 years. Our split-level house sits in a neighborhood where everyone knows your business before you do, and apparently my business was about to become very interesting. I rolled out from under the Camry, wiping my hands on an already filthy rag. Through the kitchen window, I could see them clearly. Jessica, 35 and still beautiful despite the growing hardness around her eyes, sitting at our breakfast table with her unholy trinity. Tara Morrison, the ringleader. 42, divorced twice with a McMansion bought with alimony money and a talent for poisoning other people's relationships. She had that aggressive blonde bob that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and the dead eyes of someone who'd given up on her own happiness years ago. Next to her sat Megan Walsh, our local social media vulture. 38, always filming something for her Instagram stories, treating real life like content for her pathetic attempt at influencer status. She had her phone out now, probably live streaming my wife's marital dissatisfaction to her 200 followers. And then there was Lila Chen. Wait, scratch that. Lila Peterson. Quiet, mousy Lila with her nervous smile and calculating eyes. She nodded along with everything the other 2 said, but something about her always made my skin crawl. Like she was studying everyone, filing away weaknesses for later use. "Mike's just so predictable," Jessica was saying now. "Work, dinner, TV, bed, same thing every day." "You're still young, honey," Tara purred. "You could start over, find someone who appreciates what they have." I'd heard enough. I walked into the kitchen, my work boots heavy on the linoleum. "Ladies," I said, forcing a smile, "don't let me interrupt your life coaching session." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Megan quickly lowered her phone. Lila's eyes darted between Jessica and me like she was watching a tennis match. Only Tara held my gaze, her smile sharp as a blade. "We were just telling Jess she has options," Tara said sweetly. "Options," I repeated, opening the fridge and grabbing a beer. "Like what? Online dating? Speed dating? Or are you volunteering to set her up with one of your ex-husbands?" Jessica's face flushed. "Mike, don't be an ass." "Just curious about these better options you ladies keep discussing." I popped the beer open, took a long sip. "Because from where I stand, Jess has a house, a husband who works his ass off, and a 14-year-old daughter who needs stability. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the guy paying for it all." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, Tara stood up, smoothing down her designer jeans. "We should go, Jess. Think about what we talked about." They filed out, Megan still clutching her phone, Lila throwing one last unreadable look over her shoulder. Jessica didn't meet my eyes as she walked them to the door. When she came back, I was still standing by the fridge, beer in hand. "They're just looking out for me," she said defensively. "Are they? Or are they just miserable and want company? God, Mike, when did you become so cynical?" "Around the time I realized my wife discusses our marriage with everyone except me." She turned away, started loading the dishwasher with sharp, angry movements. "Maybe if you were home more, we'd have more to talk about." "I'm home every night by 6:30. Being here isn't the same as being present." It was an old argument, worn smooth by repetition. I finished my beer and headed for the shower, feeling like a stranger in my own house. That night, lying in bed beside Jessica's rigid form, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when everything had gone so wrong. We used to laugh together, used to talk about dreams, plans, stupid things we'd seen on TV. Now we were like roommates splitting utilities, polite and distant. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from my employee, Sam. "Dude, you see Megan's story? She's got video of your kitchen. Caption says, 'Drama at the Thompsons.' This town's gonna eat this up." I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but all I could hear was Tara's voice. "You deserve better, Jess." The next morning, Jessica was already gone when I woke up. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim like a goodbye kiss I'd never get. Our daughter Emma had left for school early, probably to avoid the tension that hung in our house like smoke. I got to the shop by 7, hoping work would clear my head. Sam was already there, a 25-year-old kid with more tattoos than sense, but hands that could coax life out of any engine. "Boss," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We need to talk." "What now?" "Mrs. Morrison called. Canceled her service appointment. Said she's taking her business elsewhere." "Tara?" "Of course." "Anyone else?" "Two more, both friends of your wife's crew." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They say why? Something about not supporting businesses that don't respect women. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Respect women. Right. The morning crawled by. Every customer who walked in felt like a judgment. Did they know? Had they seen Megan's social media posts? In a town of 8,000 people, secrets had the lifespan of mayflies. Around noon, Derek Williams stopped by. Derek ran the boxing gym downtown, a grizzled ex-Marine who'd become something like a mentor to me over the years. He took one look at my face and shook his head. "You look like hell, Thompson." "Feel worse." "Heard there's trouble at home." "You heard right." I wiped my hands on a rag, not really cleaning anything. "My wife's friends think she deserves better." Derek snorted. "Those vultures? They've been circling your marriage for years, waiting for blood in the water." "Maybe they're right. Maybe she does deserve better." "Bullshit." Derek's voice was sharp. "You know what your problem is. You're fighting fair in a dirty war. Those women don't want your wife to be happy. They want her to be as miserable as they are. So what am I supposed to do?" Derek's smile was grim. "Stop being the nice guy. Nice guys finish last, and divorced guys finish broke." That afternoon, I decided to surprise Jessica with lunch from her favorite place, Giuseppe's Italian. Maybe we could talk, really talk, without her friends poisoning the well. I found her at the yoga studio where she taught 3 classes a week. Through the window, I could see her in warrior pose, looking peaceful and centered in a way she never did at home anymore. I waited in the parking lot, Giuseppe's bag growing cold on the passenger seat. When class ended, Jessica emerged with her students, mostly other wives from our neighborhood, women who nodded politely but didn't quite meet my eyes anymore. "Mike?" Jessica looked genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Brought lunch. Thought we could talk." For a moment, her face softened. Then I saw Tara's BMW pull into the lot, and Jessica's expression shifted back to guarded. "I already have plans," she said as Tara approached, designer sunglasses reflecting my face back at me in duplicate. "Mike," Tara said with false brightness. "How nice. Playing hooky from work?" "Just bringing my wife lunch. You know, husband stuff." "How sweet. Though I'm sure Jess can buy her own lunch. Modern women and all." Jessica looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Maybe we could do this later, Mike." "Sure." I handed her the bag, our fingers brushing briefly. "Later." I drove back to the shop with Derek's words echoing in my head. "Stop being the nice guy." But how do you fight people who've already decided you're the villain? That evening, Emma came home from school with red eyes and a sullen expression. She dropped her backpack by the door and headed straight for the stairs. "Hey, kiddo," I called. "How was school?" She paused, one foot on the bottom step. "Everyone's talking about you and Mom." My heart sank. What are they saying? That you're controlling. That Mom's finally standing up for herself. She turned to face me, and I saw Jessica's eyes staring back at me with 14-year-old judgment. "Is it true?" "Is what true?" "That you're trying to keep Mom from being happy?" The words hit like a physical blow. "Emma, that's not... Because if it is, then maybe you should just leave her alone." She ran upstairs, leaving me standing in the hallway feeling like I'd been sucker punched. This was how it started, I realized. First the friends, then the community, now my own daughter. They were building a narrative, and I was the monster in their story. That night, Jessica came home late, smelling like wine and other people's perfume. She moved around the bedroom quietly, thinking I was asleep. "Good time with the girls?" I asked into the darkness. She froze, one shoe halfway off. "We just went to dinner." "Where?" "Does it matter?" "It does to me." She sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion or exasperation. "Castellanos. The new place on 5th Street." I knew Castellanos. Expensive. The kind of place you went to celebrate something or impress someone. What was the occasion? There wasn't one. We just wanted to try it. On a Tuesday night. "Mike, I'm tired. Can we not do this?" "Do what? Talk to my wife?" She climbed into bed, turning her back to me. "Good night, Mike." I lay there listening to her breathe, knowing she wasn't sleeping either. The space between us felt like an ocean, and I was drowning in the middle of it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "She looked beautiful tonight. Shame you weren't there to see it." I stared at the screen until the words burned into my retinas. Someone had been watching Jessica tonight. Someone who had my number but didn't want me to know who they were. I got up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street. Porch lights glowed like tired eyes, and I wondered how many of our neighbors were sleeping peacefully while my world crumbled around me. The next morning brought the first real evidence. I was getting ready for work when I noticed Jessica's phone charging on the kitchen counter. She was in the shower, and for the first time in our marriage, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I looked. The phone was locked, but the preview of her latest text was visible on the screen. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for round 2. Sexy." The message was from a contact labeled personal trainer, but the profile picture showed a young guy with too much muscle and not enough brain. Definitely not the 60-year-old woman Jessica claimed was helping her get back in shape. My hands shook as I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it. 15 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Standing in my own kitchen, holding proof that my wife was cheating on me. The shower was still running. I had maybe 5 more minutes before Jessica came downstairs. 5 minutes to decide what kind of man I was going to be. Derek's voice echoed in my head. "Stop being the nice guy." I picked up the phone again and memorized the number. Then I went to work, driving on autopilot while my mind raced through possibilities, plans, and the kind of revenge that would make Tara Morrison and her crew wish they'd never heard my name. The thing about discovering your wife's affair is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It's like carbon monoxide poisoning, slow, insidious, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already half dead. I spent the morning at the shop pretending to work, while my mind replayed every suspicious moment from the past few months. The new clothes Jessica claimed were on sale, the sudden interest in fitness, the way she guarded her phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Boss, you okay?" Sam asked around noon. "You've been staring at that carburetor for 20 minutes. Just thinking. About Mrs. Thompson?" I looked up sharply. "What about her?" Sam shifted uncomfortably. "Nothing, man. Just, you know how people talk." "What are they saying?" "Probably nothing true. You know how this town is." "Tell me, Sam." He sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. "Word is, she's been seen around town with some young guy. Musclehead type. But like I said, probably just gossip." So it wasn't just me who'd noticed. The whole town was watching my marriage implode like a slow-motion car crash, and I was the last one to see it coming. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I left work early and followed my wife. Jessica's yoga class ended at 3. Instead of heading home, she drove across town to an apartment complex I'd never seen before. The kind of place that catered to young professionals and people trying to look more successful than they were. I parked across the street and watched her walk up to a second-floor apartment. She didn't knock. She had a key. The door opened before she could use it, and out stepped the guy from her phone's profile picture. He was everything I wasn't. 24, maybe 25, with the kind of sculpted physique that came from spending more time at the gym than at work. He wore a tank top that showed off sleeve tattoos and the cocky smile of someone who'd never had to work for anything in his life. He pulled Jessica into his arms and kissed her like they were starring in their own romantic movie. She melted into him, laughing at something he whispered in her ear. It was the way she used to look at me, back when we were young and stupid and thought love was enough to conquer everything. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching the windows of his apartment, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. This wasn't just a fling or a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown relationship, complete with keys and afternoon rendezvous, and my wife playing house with a kid who probably couldn't even remember 9/11. When Jessica finally emerged, her hair was messed up and her clothes wrinkled. She looked younger, happier, more alive than she had in years. The musclehead walked her to her car, kissing her goodbye like a teenager. I followed her home, staying far enough back to avoid detection. She beat me there by 10 minutes, just enough time to shower and change clothes before I walked through the door. "Hey," she said brightly, too brightly. "How was work?" "Fine. You?" "Good. Taught my class, ran some errands." "Errands. Right." Emma was at the kitchen table doing homework, earbuds in, oblivious to the tension crackling between her parents. Jessica moved around the kitchen preparing dinner, humming under her breath. She seemed almost giddy, and I realized this was what happiness looked like on her. It just wasn't happiness with me. "I'm going out for a bit," I said after dinner. "Where?" Jessica asked, and for a split second I heard something like concern in her voice. "Derek's gym. Need to hit something." She didn't argue. Derek's boxing gym occupied a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. The smell of sweat and leather hung in the air like incense, and the rhythmic pounding of fists against heavy bags provided a soundtrack for controlled violence. Derek was working with a young fighter when I walked in, calling out combinations and corrections. He saw me and nodded toward the locker room. "Gear up," he said. "You look like you need to bleed off some pressure." 20 minutes later, I was pounding the heavy bag with everything I had, imagining the musclehead's pretty face with each impact. Derek held the bag steady, absorbing the force of my rage. "Feel better?" he asked when I finally stopped, gasping and dripping sweat. "Not even close." "Want to talk about it?" So I told him. Everything. The text message, the apartment, the way Jessica looked at her lover like he hung the moon. Derek listened without judgment, occasionally grunting acknowledgement. "What's his name?" Derek asked when I finished. "Don't know. Jessica's got him listed as personal trainer in her phone." Derek pulled out his own phone, scrolled through something. "What's the apartment complex?" "Riverside Gardens. Building C, second floor." "Jace Morrison," Derek said after a few minutes. 24, works part-time at Gold's Gym, fights amateur MMA when he can get matches. Real name's Jason, but he thinks Jace sounds cooler. I stared at him. "How the hell do you know all that?" "Kid's been sniffing around here for months, trying to get training. Too lazy to put in real work, but he talks a big game. Also," Derek's expression darkened, "Morrison, any relation to your wife's friend Tara?" The pieces clicked into place like a puzzle solving itself. "Son of a bitch." "Nephew, actually. Tara's been bragging about her successful nephew for years. Kid's a loser, but he's pretty and he's got abs, so he does okay with bored housewives looking for excitement." The betrayal felt complete now. It wasn't just Jessica cheating, it was Tara orchestrating the whole thing, using her own nephew to destroy my marriage, the woman who'd been coming to my house, eating my food, pretending to be my wife's friend while she set up the demolition. "What are you thinking?" Derek asked, recognizing the look on my face. "I'm thinking it's time to stop being the nice guy." "Mike, be smart about this. Don't do anything that'll land you in jail." "I'm not stupid, Derek, but I'm done playing defense." I drove home with a plan forming in my mind. If Tara wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real player looked like. If Jessica wanted excitement, I'd give her more than she bargained for. And if Jace Morrison thought he could steal another man's wife without consequences, he was about to get an education in small-town justice. The house was quiet when I got back. Emma was in her room, probably on social media spreading more gossip about her dysfunctional parents. Jessica was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and her laptop. "Good workout?" she asked without looking up. "Very productive." She was scrolling through Facebook, smiling at something on the screen, probably messages from her boyfriend or likes on photos from their secret dates. The casual intimacy of it, her conducting her affair right in front of me, was almost impressive in its audacity. "Jess?" I said quietly. "Hmm?" "My friends say I deserve better." Her head snapped up, wine sloshing in her glass. "What?" I smiled, and it felt like showing teeth. "You know what I told them?" She stared at me, something like fear flickering in her eyes. "I told them to help me find a better wife." The color drained from her face. "Mike, what are you—" "Good night, Jess. Enjoy your wine." I went upstairs, leaving her sitting there with her mouth open and her laptop casting blue light on her guilty face. In our bedroom, I pulled out my phone and did some research on Jace Morrison. Social media made stalking so much easier these days. Within an hour, I knew where he worked, what he drove, who his friends were, and most importantly, what he was insecure about. The kid posted constantly, gym selfies, motivational quotes, pictures of his car, and humble brags about his training career. But buried in the comments and tagged photos was the real story. Jace Morrison was a wannabe who'd never won a fight, never held a job for more than 6 months, and lived off his aunt's generosity while pretending to be a success. He was exactly the kind of man who'd go after a married woman because single women his own age could see right through him. Perfect. I started with something simple. Jace's car, a black Mustang he'd probably bought with Tara's money, was parked in the same spot every morning when he went to the gym. The apartment complex had security cameras, but they didn't cover the far end of the lot where the pretty boy liked to park. I waited until 5 a.m., when the complex was dead quiet, and paid him a visit. Nothing dramatic. Just a key along the driver's side door and a note under his windshield wiper. "Hope you're better at stealing wives than you are at parking." Then I went to work and waited. The call came around noon. Jessica, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Mike, something happened to Jace's car. Someone vandalized it." "Jace?" My trainer. Someone keyed his car and left a threatening note. That's terrible. Did he call the police? He thinks it might have been you. Me? Why would I vandalize some trainer's car? I don't even know the guy. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew. Maybe he should be more careful where he parks, I continued. These apartment complexes can be dangerous, all kinds of unsavory characters hanging around. Mike, I've got to go, Jess. Customer waiting. I hung up and went back to work, humming under my breath. Round one to me. The real fireworks started that evening. I was at home, innocently watching TV, when Jessica burst through the door with murder in her eyes. What the hell is wrong with you? She shouted. Emma looked up from her phone, suddenly interested. This was better than whatever drama she'd been following online. I'm sorry, I said mildly. You know exactly what you did. I worked on cars, came home, made dinner, and now I'm watching the news. Pretty standard Tuesday. Don't play dumb, Mike. I know it was you. I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. She stood there breathing hard, her fists clenched, looking like she wanted to hit something. The problem was, she couldn't prove anything. I'd been careful, and Jace Morrison wasn't exactly the type to involve police in his personal drama. Stay away from him, she said finally. Stay away from who? You know who. I looked at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Emma was staring at both of us, finally understanding that something serious was happening. Jess, I said quietly, I don't know who you're talking about, but if someone's bothering you, maybe you should tell your husband about it. I might be able to help. She opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she explain without admitting the affair? How could she ask for my protection for her lover? This isn't over, she said. I certainly hope not. She stormed upstairs, and I heard our bedroom door slam. Emma looked at me with wide eyes. Dad, what's going on? Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. But she was 14, not 4, and she'd inherited her mother's intelligence along with her eyes. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit harder than I'd expected. I don't know, Emma. That's up to your mother. But you still love her, right? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw myself at that age, desperate for adults to make sense, for the world to be stable and predictable. How could I explain that love wasn't always enough? That sometimes the person you love becomes someone you don't recognize? It's complicated, kiddo. That's what adults always say when they don't want to tell the truth. Smart girl, too smart for her own good. That night, Jessica didn't come to bed until after midnight. She slipped in quietly, probably thinking I was asleep, and lay on her side of the mattress like she was afraid to get too close. Jess, I whispered into the darkness. What? Are you happy? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. For a moment, I thought she might actually answer honestly. I don't know, she said finally. Do you want to be? Of course I do. Then maybe it's time we talked, really talked, about what you want, what I want, what's best for Emma. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I can't do this anymore, Mike. Do what? Pretend everything's okay. Pretend we're still the same people we were 10 years ago. We don't have to pretend. We can figure it out. Can we? Or are you just going to keep playing games and making threats? There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. She knew I knew, even if she couldn't say it directly. I'm not the one playing games, Jess. She turned over, facing away from me. I want a separation. The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, I felt something like relief. The waiting was over. The pretending could stop. Okay, I said. Okay? If that's what you want, then okay. We'll figure out the details tomorrow. Just like that? What did you expect? A fight? Begging? Tears? I don't know. I'm not going to force you to stay married to me, Jessica. If you're that miserable, then maybe this is for the best. She started crying then, quiet sobs that shook the mattress. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to pull her close and promise we'd work it out. But that part was getting smaller every day, overwhelmed by anger and disappointment and the growing certainty that the woman I'd married was gone. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. I never meant for it to happen. But it did. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did? She cried herself to sleep, and I lay awake planning my next move. Because while Jessica thought this was the end of our story, I was just getting started. She wanted a separation? Fine. But it was going to be on my terms, not hers. And definitely not on Tara Morrison's terms. The war was just beginning. The next morning, Jessica was gone before I woke up. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, and there was a note on the kitchen table. Staying at Tara's for a few days. We'll talk when I'm ready. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Of course she was staying at Tara's. The puppet master wanted her strings close. Emma came downstairs as I was making breakfast, her face puffy from crying. She'd obviously heard more than she'd let on last night. "Is Mom really gone?" she asked. "Just for a few days. She needs some space to think." "About the divorce?" I flipped her pancakes, buying time. "About what she wants." "What do you want, Dad?" Loaded question from a 14-year-old. "I want you to be okay. Everything else is secondary." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. In her world, parents were supposed to fight for their marriages, not let them slip away with quiet resignation. She didn't understand that sometimes fighting just makes the bleeding worse. I dropped Emma at school and headed to the shop, where Sam was already working on a brake job. "Heard about Mrs. Thompson," he said without looking up. "News travels fast. Tara Morrison's been telling everyone who'll listen that she's providing sanctuary for her friend, making you sound like some kind of monster." "Am I?" Sam finally looked at me. "Not yet, but you're getting that look." "What look?" "The look guys get right before they do something stupid." Maybe Sam was right. Maybe I was turning into something I didn't recognize. But if I was going to be the villain in everyone's story, I might as well make it count. Around noon, I got a visitor I wasn't expecting. Jace Morrison walked into my shop like he owned the place, his pretty boy face set in what he probably thought was an intimidating expression. "You Mike Thompson?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." "I'm asking." He stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage. The kid was maybe 6'2", all muscle and swagger. "I think we need to talk." "About?" "About you staying away from my car, and my business." I set down my wrench and really looked at him. Up close, Jace Morrison was even more pathetic than his social media suggested. Designer gym clothes that probably cost more than most people's car payments, perfectly styled hair, and the kind of fake confidence that crumbled the moment someone pushed back. "Your business?" I repeated. "What business is that?" "You know what business." "Enlighten me." His jaw tightened. "Jessica." "Jessica Thompson? My wife?" "Your ex-wife." "Interesting. Last I checked, we were still married. Separated, maybe, but definitely still married." "Not for long." I smiled, and he took an involuntary step back. "You seem pretty confident about that." "She deserves better than this." He gestured around the shop like it was a crime scene. "Better than you." "Funny, that's exactly what her friends keep saying." "Because it's true." "Tell me something, Jace. How long have you been planning this? How long have you and Aunt Tara been working on my wife?" His face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Tara sets up the meeting, probably at the gym where you work. She makes sure Jessica's feeling vulnerable, dissatisfied with her boring old husband. Then you swoop in, all muscles and youth and empty promises. Classic setup. You're crazy." "Am I?" "Because from where I stand, it looks like a family business. Tara destroys marriages. You provide the entertainment. How many other wives have you trained, Jace?" He was sweating now, despite the cool October air. "Stay away from Jessica." "Or what?" "Or I'll make you." I laughed, and the sound echoed off the concrete walls. "You'll make me?" "Kid, I've been working with my hands for 20 years. You've been working out for maybe 5. You really think those pretty muscles are going to help you in a real fight?" "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be." We stared at each other for a long moment, and I could see him calculating his chances. He was younger, stronger, probably faster, but I was meaner, and I had nothing left to lose. "This isn't over," he said finally. "No, it's not. But when it is, you're going to wish you'd stayed away from other men's wives." He left without another word, his tough guy act deflating like a punctured tire. I went back to work, but my hands were shaking with adrenaline and rage. That afternoon brought another surprise visitor. Megan Walsh, Jessica's social media-obsessed friend, walked into the shop with her phone already recording. "Mike Thompson," she announced like she was a reporter at a press conference. "Care to comment on the allegations that you've been stalking and threatening your wife's fitness trainer?" I looked directly into her camera. "No comment." "Sources say you've been following Jessica, vandalizing property, and making threats against innocent people." "Sources, huh? What sources would those be, Megan?" She lowered the phone slightly. "I'm just trying to get the truth." "The truth is that my wife is having an affair with a 24-year-old loser," and her so-called friends orchestrated the whole thing. You want to put that on your Instagram? Her mouth dropped open. She'd expected denials, probably some angry outburst she could edit to make me look unhinged. She hadn't expected me to own it. That's not... What's not what? True? Your friend Tara didn't introduce Jessica to her nephew? They're not screwing around while I'm at work supporting the family? Come on, Megan, I thought you were all about the truth. She raised the phone again, but her hands were shaking. Jessica deserves to be happy. I agree, but happiness built on lies doesn't last. Ask Tara. She's an expert on failed relationships. You're disgusting. I'm honest. There's a difference. She left in a huff, probably already editing the footage to make me look as bad as possible. I didn't care. Let the whole town see what I really thought about Jessica's new life choices. That evening, I drove to Tara's McMansion. The house was a monument to divorce settlements and bad taste, all fake columns and oversized windows. Jessica's car was in the driveway next to Tara's BMW and Jace's keyed Mustang. I didn't get out of the truck. I just sat there, engine running, and waited. Eventually, curiosity got the better of them. Tara appeared at a window, then Jessica, then Jace. They stood there staring at me like I was some kind of dangerous animal. I pulled out my phone and called Jessica's number. I could see her answer through the window. What do you want, Mike? To talk to my wife. I'm not ready. When will you be? I don't know. Then I'll wait. I hung up and settled back in my seat. Let them wonder what I was planning. Let them worry about what came next. For the first time since this whole mess started, I held the cards. After an hour, Jace came out. He walked over to my truck with that same fake swagger, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. You need to leave, he said. Public street. You're harassing them. I'm waiting for my wife. She doesn't want to see you. She can tell me that herself. He stood there for another minute, clearly out of his depth. Finally, he went back inside. A few minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Janet Rodriguez? Damn, I'd forgotten Derek said no Rodriguez names. Officer Janet Williams got out and walked over to my truck. Janet was a good cop, someone I'd known since high school. Mike, she said through my open window. What's going on? Waiting for my wife? On a public street? Last I checked, that was legal. She sighed. They say you're harassing them. I'm sitting in my truck. Haven't said a word to anyone except Jessica, and she's my wife. Separated wife. Still my wife. Janet looked back at the house, where 3 faces were pressed against the window. Look, Mike, I get it. This situation sucks. But sitting out here isn't going to solve anything. Probably not. So why don't you go home? Let everyone cool off? Because I'm tired of being the reasonable one, Janet. I'm tired of everyone expecting me to just roll over and take it while my wife screws around with some kid. That's not my business. No, but the law is. And last I checked, adultery might be morally wrong, but it's not illegal. Sitting on a public street isn't illegal either. She studied my face for a long moment. You're not going to do anything stupid, are you? Define stupid. Mike, I'm not going to hurt anyone if that's what you're asking, but I'm not going to pretend this is okay either. Janet nodded slowly. 1 hour. Then I want you gone, or I'll have to cite you for disturbing the peace. Fair enough. She drove away, and I settled in for my final 55 minutes. The faces in the window had multiplied. Now I could see Lila Peterson in there too, probably taking notes for her own twisted amusement. At exactly 59 minutes, I started the truck and drove away. But not before I saw Jessica's face in the window, and for just a moment, she looked like she wanted to run after me, almost like she remembered who we used to be. That night, alone in my house for the first time in 15 years, I sat at the kitchen table and planned my endgame. Because while Jessica thought she was starting a new life, I was about to show her exactly what she was giving up, and more importantly, what it was going to cost her. The war wasn't over. It was just getting interesting. 3 days passed in a strange kind of peace. Jessica stayed at Tara's, Emma shuttled between houses like a diplomat in a Cold War, and I worked on cars and planned my revenge. Because that's what this had become. Not a fight for my marriage, but a systematic dismantling of the people who'd destroyed it. The first domino fell on Friday morning. I'd been doing research on Tara Morrison's finances, and what I found was better than Christmas morning. The woman who'd been playing puppet master with my marriage was about to discover that some games have consequences. I walked into Cedar Falls City Hall at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a folder full of documents and a smile that would have made Derek proud. The clerk, a woman named Betty who'd been processing permits since the Carter administration, looked up with professional boredom. "Help you, Mike?" Need to file a complaint about unpaid services. Betty's eyebrows rose. Unpaid services complaints were serious business in a small town. They got posted publicly, and in Cedar Falls, public shame was more effective than any collection agency. I handed over the paperwork. 3 months of auto services for Tara Morrison, totaling $2,147.83. Oil changes, brake work, a transmission service, and a complete engine diagnostic. All performed on the friend discount that Jessica had authorized, all completely unpaid, despite multiple invoices. Says here she owes almost $3,000, Betty said, reviewing the documents. Plus late fees and interest. She's been dodging my calls for weeks. You sure about this, Mike? Once I file this, it goes public. I'm sure. Betty stamped the papers with the kind of bureaucratic finality that could ruin reputations. She's got 30 days to respond or it goes to collections. Thanks, Betty. By noon, half the town knew that Tara Morrison, the woman who'd been lecturing everyone about financial responsibility and supporting local businesses, was a deadbeat who stiffed the very mechanic whose marriage she'd helped destroy. The second domino was more personal. I'd been tracking Jace Morrison's social media obsessively, and the kid was predictably stupid about operational security. He posted his workout schedule, his favorite bars, even his work shifts at the gym. Friday night, I followed him to Murphy's Tavern, the kind of dive bar where young guys went to feel tough and older guys went to remember when they were young. Jace was holding court in a corner booth, surrounded by other muscleheads and telling stories that probably had very little basis in reality. I sat at the bar and ordered a beer, close enough to hear but far enough away to avoid immediate confrontation. The kid was bragging about his older woman, describing Jessica in terms that made my jaw clench. She's so grateful, you know, Jace was saying. Husband never paid attention to her, never made her feel special. I show her what a real man can do, and she just melts. His friends laughed and made the kind of crude comments that would have gotten them punched in a more civilized establishment. I finished my beer and walked over to their table. Jace Morrison, I said pleasantly. The conversation died. Jace looked up with the expression of a deer caught in headlights. Thompson, what do you want? Just wanted to thank you. Thank me? For taking such good care of my wife. Really going above and beyond the call of duty. His friends were looking back and forth between us like spectators at a tennis match. The smart ones were already reaching for their wallets, sensing trouble. I don't know what you're talking about, Jace said. Sure you do. Personal training? Very personal, from what I hear. You're drunk. Stone sober, actually, but I'm curious about something. What? I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Does Jessica know about the other wives, or does she think she's special? The blood drained from his face. There are no other wives. Really? Because I've been asking around, and your reputation precedes you. Seems like you specialize in married women going through rough patches. Very niche market. You're lying. Am I? Want me to start naming names? He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. But you might want to listen to this. Stay away from my wife. She's not your wife anymore. Actually, she is. Separated isn't divorced, kid. And until those papers are signed, she's still Mrs. Thompson, which makes you the other man in a very public adultery case. I let that sink in for a moment. In Ohio, adultery was still technically illegal, even if it wasn't often prosecuted. More importantly, it could affect divorce proceedings, especially when it came to asset division and custody. You wouldn't, Jace said. Try me. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth open and his friends staring at him like he'd grown a second head. The seed was planted. Now I just had to wait for it to grow. Saturday morning brought the third domino. Emma came home from her sleepover at a friend's house with news that made my blood boil. Dad, kids at school are saying weird stuff about you and Mom. What kind of stuff? That you're crazy, that you've been stalking Mom and threatening people. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. What do you think? Emma studied my face with the serious expression she'd inherited from her mother. I think you're sad and angry, but not crazy. Good, because I'm not crazy. Hurt, yes. Disappointed, definitely, but not crazy. Are you going to fight for Mom? I already did, sweetheart, for years. But you can't fight for someone who doesn't want to be fought for. So you're just giving up? I'm accepting reality. Your mother has made her choice. Emma nodded, but I could see the tears forming in her eyes. I wish things could go back to the way they were. Me too, kiddo. Me too. That afternoon, I got a call from Jessica. Her voice was tight with barely controlled fury. What the hell did you do to Tara? Hello to you too, Jess. Don't play games, Mike. She got some kind of legal notice about unpaid bills. She owes me money. Has for months. Since when do you file complaints against friends? Since when is Tara my friend? She orchestrated this whole thing, Jessica. She introduced you to her nephew, encouraged you to cheat, and then had the balls to stiff me on her car repairs. Silence on the other end. Then? You're being petty. I'm being practical. I run a business, not a charity. This is about revenge. This is about consequences. Actions have consequences, Jess, even for people like Tara who think they're above them. You're destroying everything. I'm not the one who destroyed anything. I'm just cleaning up the mess. She hung up without another word. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or you'll regret it. I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Derek with a note. Looks like I'm getting to them. His response came immediately. Good. Scared enemies make mistakes. Sunday brought the fourth domino, and it was the biggest one yet. I was at home, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life, when Sam called. Boss, you need to see this. See what? Megan Walsh's Instagram. She posted a video. I found the video on Megan's account, and what I saw made me laugh out loud. It was security footage from Murphy's Tavern, showing my confrontation with Jace Morrison. But Megan had edited it to make it look like I was the aggressor, cutting out the parts where Jace was bragging about sleeping with my wife. The caption read, Local business owner threatens young man for dating his ex-wife. This is what toxic masculinity looks like. Domestic abuse, each toxic men, support survivors. The video had been shared dozens of times already, with comments ranging from supportive to vicious. Half the town was calling me a psychopath, the other half was calling Jessica a whore. It was exactly the kind of social media shitstorm that could destroy lives in a place like Cedar Falls. But Megan had made one crucial mistake. She'd posted security footage without permission, and she'd edited it to misrepresent what actually happened. That was defamation, and in Ohio, defamation was a serious legal matter. I called my lawyer. Monday morning, I walked into the offices of Patterson and Associates with a printed copy of Megan's video and a check for a $5,000 retainer. Jim Patterson had been handling legal matters for small businesses in Cedar Falls for 30 years, and he knew where all the bodies were buried. Mike, he said, reviewing the evidence, this is pretty clear-cut defamation. She edited the footage to make you look threatening, and she's making false claims about domestic abuse. What are my options? We can file a cease and desist order, demand she take down the video and post a retraction. If she refuses, we can sue for damages. Do it. You sure? This is going to make things ugly. Things are already ugly, Jim. At least this way, I'm fighting back. By Tuesday afternoon, Megan had received her cease and desist order. By Wednesday morning, the video was gone from her Instagram, replaced by a grudging retraction that blamed technical difficulties for the misleading edit. But the damage was done. The town was divided, and I was at the center of a controversy that would follow me for years. The question was whether I cared anymore. The answer came Thursday evening when Jessica showed up at my door. She looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She stood on my porch like a stranger, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Can I come in? I stepped aside, and she walked into the house we'd shared for 15 years. Everything was exactly the same, but somehow it felt different with her there. Emma's at Tara's, she said. I know. We need to talk. About what? She sat down on the couch, in the same spot where she used to curl up with her laptop and conduct her affair. About ending this. This? The war, the revenge, the whole thing. I sat down across from her, studying her face. I'm listening. I want a divorce. Clean, simple, no fault. We split everything 50-50, share custody of Emma, and move on with our lives. And in return, you stop. No more legal complaints, no more confronting Jace, no more turning this town against my friends. Your friends turned this town against themselves, Jessica. I just gave them the rope. Please, Mike. I can't take much more of this. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She'd wanted excitement, adventure, a chance to feel young and desired again. Instead, she'd gotten public humiliation and a front-row seat to the destruction of everything she'd built. What about Jace? I asked. What about him? Is he worth it? Is he worth throwing away 15 years of marriage, breaking up our family, destroying your reputation? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, her eyes were full of tears. I don't know anymore. But you're not coming back. I can't. Too much has happened. I nodded. I'd known this moment would come, Had been preparing for it even while I planned my revenge. The marriage was over. Had been over for months, maybe years. Everything since then had just been the death throes. "Okay," I said. "Okay? I'll call Jim Patterson tomorrow. We'll draw up the papers." She looked surprised, like she'd expected more of a fight. "Just like that?" "Just like that. But I have conditions." "What conditions?" "Emma stays in Cedar Falls. I get her every other week, and I don't want Jace around her until the divorce is final." "Mike?" "Those are my terms, Jessica. Take them or leave them." She nodded reluctantly. "Anything else?" "Yeah. One more thing." "What?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street. "I want you to know that I loved you, really loved you, and if you'd come to me 6 months ago and told me you were unhappy, we could have worked it out. We could have gone to counseling, taken a vacation, figured out how to be happy together again." "Mike?" "But you didn't. You went to your friends, and they convinced you that the problem was me, that I was holding you back, keeping you from being happy, and maybe I was. Maybe we just grew apart and didn't notice until it was too late." I turned back to face her. "But what I can't forgive is the lies, the sneaking around, the way you let them turn me into the villain while you played the victim. That's what this has all been about, Jessica. Not revenge. Justice." She was crying now, quiet tears that streaked her makeup and made her look younger and older at the same time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know. But sorry doesn't fix anything." She left a few minutes later, and I sat alone in my empty house, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The war was over. I'd won, in the sense that I'd exposed the truth and held people accountable for their actions. But like most victories, it felt hollow. The next morning, I called Jim Patterson and started the divorce proceedings. By afternoon, the news was all over town. Mike and Jessica Thompson were officially splitting up. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more domino to fall, one more score to settle, and this one was going to be the most satisfying of all. Because while Jessica thought our story was ending, I was just getting to the final chapter. The annual Cedar Falls Founders Day block party was the social event of the year, the one day when the entire town gathered in Community Park to pretend we were all one big happy family. Local businesses set up booths, the high school band played patriotic songs, and everyone who was anyone made an appearance. It was the perfect stage for my final act. I'd been planning this for weeks, ever since Jessica and I signed the divorce papers. The proceedings had been surprisingly civilized. No screaming matches, no fights over assets. Just two people dividing up the remains of a dead marriage like estate sale shoppers. Emma had taken it better than expected. Kids are resilient, and she'd probably sensed the end coming long before either of her parents admitted it. She'd chosen to live with me during the school year and spend summers with Jessica, a decision that had surprised everyone except me. 14-year-olds have a keen sense of justice, and Emma knew who the real victim was in this story. The morning of the block party dawned clear and cool, perfect October weather that brought out half the county. I arrived early, ostensibly to help set up the Thompson auto booth, but really to make sure everything was in place for the show. Derek found me around noon, looking like a man with something on his mind. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Never been more sure of anything in my life. It's going to be ugly. It's already ugly. I'm just making it visible." He nodded slowly. Derek understood better than most that some fights couldn't be won with half measures. Sometimes you had to burn everything down to clear the ground for something new. Jessica arrived around 1 o'clock with her entourage, Tara, Megan, Lila, and conspicuously absent, Jace Morrison. The musclehead had made himself scarce since our confrontation at Murphy's, probably on the advice of whatever lawyer Tara had hired to deal with his legal problems. Because Jace did have legal problems now. Turns out that when you make a habit of seducing married women, some of their husbands notice patterns. I'd connected with 3 other men whose wives had been trained by Jace, and together we'd built a case for intentional interference with marriage, a civil tort that could cost him everything he had. Which wasn't much, but it was the principle that mattered. Jessica looked good, I had to admit. She'd lost weight, probably from stress, and she was wearing a new dress that flattered her figure. She was trying to project confidence, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted around looking for threats. She was right to be nervous. The confrontation started, appropriately enough, at the Thompson auto booth. I was demonstrating some basic car maintenance to a group of teenagers when I heard Tara's voice behind me. "Isn't that sweet?" she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Mike's still pretending to be a pillar of the community." I turned around slowly, taking in the full picture, Tara in her designer jeans and fake smile, Megan with her phone already recording, Lila hanging back with her usual nervous energy, and Jessica looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. "Ladies," I said pleasantly, "enjoying the festivities?" "We were," Tara replied, "until we saw the booth. False advertising, don't you think? Calling yourself a family business when you can't even keep your own family together?" A small crowd was gathering, drawn by the obvious tension. In Cedar Falls, public drama was better than cable TV. "You're right," I said, still smiling. "I should probably update my signage. Thompson Auto. Honest work for honest people." That's more accurate, don't you think? Tara's eyes narrowed. "Honest? That's rich, coming from someone who's been stalking and harassing innocent people." "Innocent people," I repeated. "Like your nephew?" The crowd was growing larger now, sensing blood in the water. I could see Jessica tugging on Tara's arm, trying to pull her away. But Tara was committed to the performance. Jace is a good kid who doesn't deserve to be terrorized by a bitter old man who can't accept that his wife found someone better. "Better," I mused. "Well, that's an interesting word choice. Tell me, Tara, what makes a 24-year-old unemployed wannabe fighter better than a man who's worked every day for 15 years to support his family?" "He makes Jessica happy." "Does he? Because from what I hear, Jessica's been pretty miserable lately. Stress will do that to a person." Megan stepped forward, phone extended like a weapon. "You're the one causing stress. You're an abuser and a stalker, and everyone knows it." I looked directly into her camera. "Everyone knows it? Really? Because I think what everyone knows is that you posted an edited video to make me look bad, then had to retract it when you got served with a defamation lawsuit." Megan's face went red. "That was a technical error." "Technical error, right." I turned back to Tara. "Speaking of errors, how's that unpaid bill situation working out? Collections can be such a hassle." "You filed that complaint out of spite." "I filed it because you owe me money, almost $3,000 plus interest. But hey, I'm sure your nephew can help you out. He must be doing well, considering how much time he spends at the gym instead of working." The crowd was eating this up. Half of them owed me money for car repairs, and they all knew Tara's reputation for looking down on people she considered beneath her. Watching her get taken down a peg was better than fireworks. "You're pathetic," Tara snarled. "A small, petty man who can't handle losing." "Losing what? A cheating wife and a bunch of fake friends? Honestly, Tara, you did me a favor. I just wish it hadn't taken me so long to see what Jessica really was." That's when Jessica finally snapped. "What I really was," she shouted, stepping forward with fury in her eyes. "What about what you really are? A boring, obsessive control freak who cared more about his precious garage than his own family?" The crowd went silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the real confrontation between the divorced couple. "You're right," I said calmly. "I did care about my work, because my work supported you, and Emma, and this house, and your yoga classes, and your girls' nights out, and everything else you wanted. I worked 60 hours a week so you could have the life you wanted." "I never asked for that." "You never asked me to stop either. You just started looking for excitement somewhere else." "I was lonely." "So was I, Jessica. But I didn't deal with it by screwing around with someone half my age." The crowd was riveted. This was better than any soap opera, and it was happening right in front of them. "At least Jace pays attention to me," Jessica said. "At least he makes me feel alive." "Where is Jace, anyway?" I asked, looking around theatrically. "I notice he's not here supporting you. Trouble in paradise?" Jessica's face crumpled slightly. He had other plans. Other plans. Or other women." "Shut up." "Because I've been talking to some other wives in town. Seems like Jace has a type. Married, vulnerable, looking for validation. You weren't his first, Jessica, and you won't be his last." "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of a Facebook conversation. "Karen Mitchell, ring a bell?" Jace was training her last year, right up until her husband found out. And before that, it was Susan Torres. And before that... Stop. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. "He's a predator, Jess, and Tara's his enabler. They target unhappy wives, break up marriages, and move on to the next victim. You're just the latest in a long line." The crowd was staring at Tara now, putting the pieces together. The woman who'd positioned herself as a relationship expert, who gave advice about finding better men and leaving toxic situations, was actually a homewrecker who used her own nephew as bait. "That's not true," Tara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? How many marriages has Jace helped end, Tara? How many families has he destroyed while you cheered him on?" "I don't have to listen to this." "No, you don't, but everyone else does. and they're going to remember this conversation the next time you try to give someone relationship advice. Tara grabbed Jessica's arm. Come on, we're leaving. But Jessica wasn't moving. She was staring at me with something like recognition in her eyes, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in months. Is it true? She asked quietly. About the other women? Ask him yourself, if you can find him. He said he loved me. I'm sure he did, right up until the lawyers started calling. Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, humiliation, and finally a kind of desperate anger. You bastard, she said. You knew all along, and you let me make a fool of myself. I tried to warn you. You wouldn't listen. You could have told me about the others. Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of making it up to hurt you? She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. She wouldn't have believed me. She was too caught up in the fantasy, too invested in the idea that she'd found her Prince Charming. This is all your fault, Tara said suddenly, pointing at me like I was the devil himself. You destroyed everything. Jessica was happy before you started your campaign of harassment. Jessica was living a lie, I replied. I just exposed the truth. The truth according to you. The truth according to reality. Your nephew is a con artist, you're his accomplice, and Jessica was his mark. The only difference between this and any other scam is that the currency was sex instead of money. You're sick. I'm honest. There's a difference. The crowd was starting to disperse, sensing that the show was over. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play, one final revelation that would cement my victory and ensure that none of these people ever bothered me again. Oh, and Lila, I said, turning to the quiet woman who'd been watching everything with calculating eyes. Thanks for all your help. Lila went pale. What? The Facebook messages, the text introductions, the way you kept pushing Jessica toward Jace even when she had doubts. Very subtle work. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You orchestrated this whole thing. Not Tara, she's too obvious. You, the quiet one, the one nobody suspects. Jessica and Tara both turned to stare at Lila, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. That's crazy, Lila stammered. Is it? Because I've been tracking the social media interactions, and they all trace back to you. You created fake accounts, sent anonymous messages, even photoshopped some pictures to make it look like Jace was more successful than he really is. Why would I do that? Because you're jealous. You've always been jealous of Jessica. Her looks, her marriage, her life, and when you couldn't have what she had, you decided to destroy it. You're insane. Am I? Then why is your husband filing for divorce? Lila's face went white as a sheet. How did you? He hired Jim Patterson. Same lawyer I used. Small town, Lila. Word gets around. The remaining crowd was staring at Lila now, seeing her for what she really was. Not the loyal friend, but the snake in the grass who'd poisoned everything she touched. I was trying to help, Lila said weakly. Help who? Yourself? Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? If you couldn't be happy, then nobody could. Lila turned and ran, pushing through the crowd like a woman fleeing a fire. Tara followed, leaving Jessica standing alone in the middle of the park, surrounded by the wreckage of her new life. I'm sorry, she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. I know. I believed them. I believed all of them. You wanted to believe them. There's a difference. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. What happens now? Now you figure out how to live with the choices you made. And us? There is no us, Jessica. There hasn't been for a long time. She walked away then, shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched her go, feeling something like pity for the woman who'd once been my wife. The block party continued around me, but the mood had shifted. People were talking in small groups, processing what they'd witnessed. Some looked at me with admiration, others with wariness. I'd won the war, but victory had made me into something harder, colder than I'd been before. Derek appeared beside me, shaking his head. Well, that was something. Yeah. Feel better? I considered the question. Did I feel better? I'd exposed the truth, held people accountable for their actions, and ensured that Jessica's friends would never be able to hurt another family the way they'd hurt mine. But I'd also destroyed my marriage, traumatized my daughter, and turned myself into the kind of man who could orchestrate public humiliations without flinching. Ask me in a year, I said. Derek nodded. What's next? Next, I go home, clean up the mess, try to figure out who I am now that the war's over. And if they come back? If they try to cause more trouble? I looked around the park, at the people who were still staring at me with a mixture of respect and fear. They'd seen what I was capable of when pushed too far. They'd witnessed the methodical destruction of people who'd thought they were untouchable. But they won't, I said. They know better now. Derek smiled grimly. Yeah, I think they do. As the sun set over Cedar Falls, I packed up my booth and headed home to my empty house. Emma was spending the weekend with Jessica, probably trying to comfort her mother through the aftermath of her very public downfall. I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the neighbors I'd known for 15 years pretend they weren't staring at me. Some of them probably thought I was a hero. Others probably thought I was a monster. Maybe I was both. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. I deleted the message without responding. Let them rage. Let them plot. Let them try to rebuild their lives from the ashes of their own making. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd done what I needed to do. They said I wasn't enough. But tonight, I was too much for all of them.